Christine Collins wakes up her son, Walter, on March 9, 1928. After measuring his height against the wall, she prepares him for school while playfully bantering with him. She drops him off at school and heads to work as a supervising phone operator at a Los Angeles telephone company. At the end of the day, she picks Walter up from school on a cable car. Walter reveals that he got into a fight after another student claimed Walter's father hated him. Christine corrects the misinformation and explains that Walter's father was scared of the responsibility that came with having a child, and left before having to face it. The next day, Christine receives an early morning phone call requesting her to come into work since one of her colleagues was sick. She reluctantly agrees, disappointing Walter as she had promised they would go to the movies the next day. She assures him that there's a sandwich in the fridge, and neighborhood girls will check on him later before leaving. At the phone company, Christine is preparing to leave for the day when her boss, Ben Harris, stops her. He commends her for her excellent job as a supervisor, and mentions the possibility of a full-time assistant manager position. Overjoyed by the prospect, Christine returns home to find Walter missing. Despite searching the neighborhood and questioning other children, she cannot locate him. Christine contacts the police and speaks with Detective Lester Ibarra, who assures her that most missing children return home within a few hours, and that she should not worry. However, she hangs up when he attempts to take her address. The following day, 2 police officers arrive at her home to gather information and a photograph of Walter. Over the following weeks, the investigation into Walter's disappearance progresses through various stages, led by Captain J.J. Jones, the head of the Missing Persons Department. In the meantime, Christine conducts her own investigation by regularly calling cities as far away as Las Vegas, to inquire about any children matching Walter's description who have been found. In another town called DeKalb, Illinois, a man and his son are at a small diner. The man realizes he left his wallet at home and the owner agrees to let him retrieve it within 20 minutes, with his son as collateral. However, after waiting for 2 hours, the owner becomes both angry and concerned for the child's safety and decides to call the police. Christine Collins moves listlessly through her job in Los Angeles, when she is approached by Captain J.J. Jones and Detective Lester, who bring good news that they have found Walter. After a big celebration, Christine is escorted by Jones, Lester, and Chief of Police James E. Davis to the train station, where in the midst of a media circus, she is reunited with a boy from the diner. However, Christine insists that he is not her son. Jones explains that 5 months in captivity can alter a person's memory and appearance. When they ask the boy who he is and his address, he responds with rehearsed lines. Despite her doubts, Christine eventually accepts the boy as her son and takes him back home. During dinner, Christine notices that the boy doesn't use manners and is circumcised, unlike Walter. She measures the boy's height, and finds that he is 3 inches shorter than Walter. She visits Jones to express her doubts, but he insists that they found the right boy, and agrees to send a doctor to verify. Dr. Earl Tarr arrives, but his examination is cursory, and he repeats Jones's explanation. Christine still refuses to believe that the boy is Walter. Later, the boy makes the mistake of calling her mommy, causing her to fly into a rage. She apologizes to the boy but asserts that they are not related. The next morning, Christine receives a call from Gustav, who warns her of what she may be getting herself into, but notes that if she pulls this off, she could be the last woman to have the wrong child returned. Christine visits Walter's dentist, who observes that the boy lacks a piece of muscle that had previously prevented the gap between Walter's teeth from closing. The dentist assures Christine that he will provide a written statement to support her claim. Similarly, Walter's former teacher also has doubts about the boy's identity, as he cannot remember her despite having taught Walter for more than a year. The teacher agrees to write a testimony and testify in court. Christine stands on the courthouse steps and declares to the media that the police have made a mistake, and she has evidence to prove it. Chief Davis is furious and orders Jones to deal with the situation. Jones arranges for Christine and the boy to be brought to him, and after a heated discussion where he accuses Christine of being delusional or a liar, Jones asks her one more time if the boy is her son. When Christine answers negatively, Jones nods to 2 people who take her to a mental hospital, where she is subjected to a harsh entrance examination series, and detained for her own and the boy's safety, until she can demonstrate her sanity and ability to take care of herself and the child. As we switch to Wineville, near Riverside, Lester investigates a missing child case involving a Canadian boy. He stops to ask for directions from a stranded motorist, who turns out to be Gordon Northcott, the owner of the Northcott Ranch. Lester thanks him and continues to the ranch where he finds Sanford Clark, and tells him he's going back home to Canada. Back at the asylum, Christine misses her appointment with Gustav and meets a woman named Carol, who, like her, was brought in under a Code 12 designation. Carol explains the available options to Christine, including keeping quiet and going home, obeying the asylum's rules and staying inside, or fighting the system and receiving repetitive shock treatments. Christine has her first appointment with the head doctor, Dr. Jonathan Steele, who dismisses her and accuses her of lying and being crazy. Despite photographic evidence of her reunion with the boy, Christine stutters and tries to explain herself, only making herself appear more insane. Meanwhile, Sanford is shown waiting in a room with other children while one of them incessantly taps a ruler, causing Sanford to visualize a man covered in blood, swinging an axe every time the ruler hits the table. Eventually, Sanford is summoned to meet with Lester, who asks him why he wanted to see him again. Sanford proceeds to recount his story of how he was initially supposed to stay with his cousin at the Northcott Ranch for a brief period, but was eventually forced to remain there. As Lester lights a cigarette, Sanford goes on to describe the sinister practices of the Northcotts. They would go to the city, pick up a boy who was alone by telling him that his parents were in the hospital, and they needed him to come with them immediately. Sanford explains that if an adult asked, the child would refuse, but if they saw that there was already a child in the car, such as Sanford, they would feel safe and get in. The Northcotts would then take the boy back to the ranch, and lock him up in the chicken coop with up to 4 or 5 other children. When the coop got too crowded, Northcott would take some of the boys and kill them with an axe. Sometimes, he would force Sanford to finish the job, and then they would have to dig graves and bury the bodies on the ranch. At the conclusion of Sanford's tale, he is in tears, and Lester is in disbelief, his cigarette having burned down to the end. After composing himself, Lester asks Sanford if he can identify the boys, and Sanford affirms. Lester produces a stack of photos of missing boys, and Sanford sifts through them, placing the ones he recognizes in a pile on the table. Eventually, he has amassed 10 or 15 photos, with only a few that he rejects. Lester examines the stack of recognized photos, scrutinizing the names on the back. He selects one and asks Sanford if he is certain, to which Sanford nods. Lester exclaims, "Jesus Christ!" He exits the room. The following day, Steele is having another conversation with Christine. Steele informs Christine that she could go home the next morning if she signs a contract admitting that the police found the right boy and she was wrong. However, Christine refuses and becomes angry, causing the doctor to call for an orderly to drag her out of the room. Carol comes to Christine's defense by fighting with several nurses and orderlies, and even punching the doctor. As a result, Carol is sent to the shock treatment room. Later, when Christine checks on her, Carol reveals that she has lost 2 pregnancies. Carol advises Christine to keep fighting and not to let the doctors and orderlies get to her. Christine laughs and Carol explains that there is a time and place to be ladylike, but this isn't it. In the meantime, Lester and his team, accompanied by Sanford, arrive at the ranch. After securing the area, they grab a shovel and ask Sanford to show them where the bodies are buried. Sanford leads them to a spot where a small coop used to stand, but now only its base remains, due to a fire. Lester instructs Sanford to start digging, and he reluctantly complies. Sanford unearths a shoe with a skeletal foot, a hand, and 2 rib cages. Lester's partners react with shock and disgust, while Lester steps forward and tells Sanford to stop. After a brief struggle, Sanford collapses in the dirt, crying. Gustav suddenly shows up with an army of lawyers, demanding to see Christine. Christine proudly refuses to sign the contract offered by Steele, who orders shock treatment. Gustav barges in with his army, just as Steele heads for his office. Gustav demands to see Christine, and an order is given to release her from the shock room and bring her to Steele's office. Steele tells her that she can leave, and she departs without fully understanding why. As she leaves, she overhears a newsie shouting the headline about the discovery of missing children's bodies at a ranch, with the Collins child believed to be dead. She faints, but Gustav is there to catch her and take her home. Some time later, Lester interviews the impostor, Walter. The boy claims innocence, but Lester threatens to charge him with accessory to murder, given the Collins boy's death. The impostor starts talking when Lester mentions that Sanford, who is only 15, is going to jail. Meanwhile, in Vancouver, Northcott arrives at his sister's house. She welcomes him, and after greeting him, She invites him to clean up upstairs. However, as soon as he goes upstairs, they flee and call the Mounties, who arrive to arrest Northcott. Christine is paid a visit by Gustav and his friend Han, in the States. Gustav asks her what her next move is, and Christine suggests a civil case against the entire department. Gustav reveals that he has found the only lawyer who has won for civil cases against the city, but he is too expensive. However, Han says he will take the case pro bono. Meanwhile, Christine and her new friends manage to release all the women who were placed under Code 12 in the asylum, including Carol. 2 weeks later, Christine and her group head to the courthouse, surrounded by people carrying signs criticizing the LAPD. Inside, all parties are present, except for the LAPD. Christine is taken to a separate courtroom where Northcott's trial is being held, and she meets Leanne Clay, the mother of one of the boys Northcott killed. On the same day, the fake Walter is reunited with his real mother by Chief Davis. However, when the boy reveals that the police told him to pretend to be Walter Collins, Davis becomes flustered. Clips from each trial are shown, the trials conclude, and Northcott is found guilty and sentenced to death by hanging. In the civil trial, Jones is permanently suspended, Davis is demoted from his position as chief, and an internal review of the steps necessary for commitment is undertaken. 2 years later, Christine is at work when Han tells her that Northcott has requested to see her, to reveal what happened to Walter. Christine meets Northcott, but he refuses to talk, claiming that he confessed to God and has been forgiven. Despite Christine's efforts to get him to talk, he remains silent. She stays for his execution the next day. Northcott remains composed and indifferent during the hanging procedure, conversing with the Reverend and claiming that he has no final words. However, he loses his composure on the way to the noose and has to be carried by 2 guards. His head is covered with a bag, and straps are tightened around his body to prevent struggling. Northcott begins to sing "Silent Night" before the floor drops, causing him to jerk briefly before becoming motionless after a minute. Several years later, on February 27, 1935, Christine's colleagues invite her to an Oscar party, but she declines, stating that she has too much work to do. Ben visits her office and also invites her, but she initially refuses. After a moment, she agrees to have dinner with him the next night if her choice for Best Picture, It Happened One Night, wins over his pick, Cleopatra. When her choice does win, Christine grins in her office and receives an unexpected phone call from Leanne Clay, who informs her that they have found one of the missing boys. Christine rushes to the Lincoln Heights precinct and meets with Leanne and her husband, who are watching as Leanne's son David is being interviewed by Lester. David reveals that he was in the chicken coop with 4 other boys, including Joseph, the Winslow brothers, and Walter. One night, 3 of the boys managed to escape, but David got stuck on the fence. Walter came back to help him, but as they were running away, the lights turned on, and Northcott and Sanford realized the boys were gone. Walter freed David, and the 2 of them escaped, while the other boys ran in different directions. David was afraid to come forward before because he thought he would be blamed for the deaths or would get into trouble. After David's interview, Christine consoles him, and he says that what Walter did was brave. She thinks that if David could escape and survive, it is possible that Walter and the other boys are alive and afraid to come forward. However, she now has something she didn't have before. When Lester asks what that is, she looks him in the eye and replies, "Hope." And that's all for this recap. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.